who is Gaius Guevara? It's he's a confusing artist. I mean, if you haven't seen my review of his last album, maybe you aren't quite familiar with who he is. But I can tell you, okay? Gaius Guevara is a 63-year-old professor of history at Temple University. Okay, you can go on down to Gladfelter Hall and go to his office hours. He's a specialist in antebellum American history, but has a general expertise on all decolonization matters. He is also a 24-year-old rapper from the hard streets of North Philadelphia who became an amazing producer and rapper in a very politically engaged way. So, what am I doing here? What's the joke here? What is this little intro? How am I trying to get you? He's not actually a 63-year-old professor of history from Temple University. I just got this flyer in the mail because my daughter's applying to colleges. But I'm not sure if the idea of a mixture of a 63-year-old American history professor and a 24-year-old kid from the streets interests you, then you might be interested in Gaius Guevara. If not, stay tuned to the end of the video where I'm going to do a slideshow that explains the similarities between Batman and Tom MacDonald. Okay, I got you there. So I'm kidding, and I'm sort of kidding, and I'm sort of not. The first album, the last album I reviewed, There Will Be No Super Slave, is a very interesting, politically engaged album. He actually messaged me and a lot of my fans, a lot of my auditors wanted me to review it, saying that, he said, do you want to review an album from an Islamo-communist? And I'm like, well, okay, great. I don't know many rap albums by Islamo-communists. I've listened to a lot of rap albums by people who are Muslim. I've listened to some rap albums by people who identify as communist. But black, Muslim, communist rappers in their early 20s making rap albums, that's a very interesting thing, which we don't see very often. So, full transparency, I have a good relationship with the record label who produced this, Fat Possum Records, out of Mississippi. They're just, at this point, they're kind of in can't miss mode. So I have a good relationship kind of talking with them. They sent me some links to this beforehand, with like artist notes, biography, a mood board, which I might show you at the end of this video. I can't tell. Like all the lyrics. And I listened to it and I was just like, oh, I don't have anything to say about this. I listened to the first couple songs. I didn't read anything. I just listened and I was like, oh man. The Islamo-communist went all materialist. He became a bourgeois capitalist pig. It took like one pretty successful, but not wildly successful underground rap album for this dude to sell out all of his values altogether. Oh, I said to myself as the album came out and I actually listened to it, I'm an idiot. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the word idiot. I am a silly person. It's a concept album. And I just missed that. I should have had more faith in the artist. It is a concept album. If you don't know what a concept album is, there's a lot of them in rock and roll, like a lot by The Who, like Tommy, or a lot by like Pink Floyd, The Wall, or, albums where it's all unified under one idea. It tells a kind of story. There have been a lot of rap albums that exist in a certain atmosphere, but very few that are technically a concept album. Good Kid, Mad City is the most popular one. I would say the best one is Always God Is Us by Onyx, but there's not that many in rap music, and this is a concept album, and that's just what I missed. I'm a busy guy. It's okay. Here I am. I finally picked up on it, and it all goes to the fact that Gaius Guevara named his album Goyard Ibn Said. So let's explain, what does Goyard Ibn Said mean? Goyard you should know, because if you love rap music, you have to know about French high fashion. I don't know why that's the case. It's just the case. I do know why it's the case, but that's the case. You have to know Chanel, you have to know Hermès, you have to know Louis Vuitton, and you have to know Goyard, a 1792 founded fashion house that's famous for its bags. Okay, but don't worry, you can afford them. They only cost $7,000 to $12,000. Okay, and up. So that's what Goyard is, and that's what a lot of this album is. A lot of this album feels like it's a rapper stunting about how he's able to afford a Goyard bag, which doesn't make sense for an Islamo-communist. But that's where you have to have faith and understand that this artist, who's a very, I want to say smart, but it goes beyond smart, creatively intelligent, right? So that it's easy to be intelligent, right? It's easy to be educated. And then to be able to make that intelligence creatively interesting is a whole nother skill. And he has that skill. We have to get to the second half, Ibn Said. So I am of an age where, I mean, I'm not as old as Professor Gais Guevara, but I'm in my late 40s. And when I was growing up, the curriculum in high schools and in colleges was diversifying, but it had not been diversified in any major way, which meant that any coverage, any history, literature, etc., by non-white people was very, very rare. We have, thankfully, in the past 30 years, diversified our curriculum. We appear to be undiversifying our curriculum. Anyways, not a good thing. That's what's happening. But what that means is young people these days know about African history, have read a book by somebody who's not white, are experienced with people who are not just cishet, straight, white, dead guys, right? That's a fairly new thing in human history. So this story of Omar ibn Said might not be known to you because it was only in 2017 that the Library of Congress really brought our attention to him. And I will include a link to his entire works. It'll take you about 5 minutes to read them. Who was Omar ibn Said? Well, he was a wealthy guy from what is now called Senegal, and he was born in 1770. And he was just walking around, frisky more than munchin', and then he was abducted and sold into slavery. Okay? And he ended up fleeing and getting arrested, and he wrote all over his walls his story and his pleas for freedom. And he wrote them in Arabic because did you know that there were Muslim slaves in America? I hadn't thought about the question, but of course there had to be because there are so many Muslims in Africa, right? There's so many Muslims in sub-Saharan Africa. It's not like it just stops at the Sahara, right? So like, oh my God. So all of a sudden, this guy ends up becoming something of a local celebrity. He ends up in the care of somebody who was interested in sort of repatriating Africa with people who had been enslaved, sort of halfway between slavery and halfway and full freedom. Anyways, and so he wrote his little story. And he wrote his story, he wrote one of the greatest stories of humankind, one of the most fascinating tales you could possibly have of being just a wealthy dude who gets scooped up and then thrown to America. But I'm going to quote some of it, and it'll take you maybe 3 more minutes to read the whole thing. But just so you get an idea of who Omar, not Goyard, Omar ibn Said is. I reside in this country by the reason of great necessity. Wicked men took me by violence and sold me to the Christians. We sailed a month and a half on the great sea to the place called Charleston in the Christian land. I fell into the hand of a small, weak, and wicked man who feared not God at all, nor did he read the gospel or pray. I was afraid to remain with a man so depraved and who committed so many crimes. I ran away. And then he goes on and describes how he was in the care of someone named Josh Owen, who was very good to him. He talks about being old and feeble and unable to work and how he is now happy. He's now a contented, happy person who's able to tell his story. And hey, if you're a J. Cole fan, it's interesting because he talks about spending a little bit of time in a place he calls Fayetteville, which is what he called Fayetteville, because he went through there. So that's who that figure is. An amazing historical figure. That's why I'm joking around that he's a professor of history, because like the story of Omar ibn Said should be known to everybody, but it's only been around for 8 years. It's only been 8 years that it's really been in the public consciousness, so maybe you missed it while you were doing something else, okay? It's totally understandable. If you did, like me, like I missed it, and now I know it. And that's one great thing that music and art can do is it can make you aware of things you were not aware of. I now, for the rest of my life, will have this little bit of understanding, which should have been there, but just wasn't there. Not by malice, just by a lack of thought. Oh yeah, of course. It's not like all people who were imported against their will to America had some kind of, like, there had to be some of them who had a more structured colonialist religion in their history. And there you go. So that's this project. It's combining a rapper who would rap about owning a $12,000 handbag and a rapper who would want you to know about Omar Said. So that's the concept. Again, they sent me the press release, all that, and described this in 2 acts. Okay? Goyard is a fictional anti-hero. It's a gaze into the desires and downfalls of a successful rapper and the exploitation of the black experience. Act 1 highlights the glory and spoils of mainstream hip-hop stardom, while Act 2 takes a surprise turn and focuses on the tragic experience faced in order to achieve that success. The unrelenting pressures and tragedies never stop. Poverty, crime, death, success, fame, fortune. Goyard is shattered, broken, suffering a mental collapse. Perhaps the greatest contradiction arrives towards the end of the album, where we find him mustering the courage to get up and try once again, maybe now ready to impart his hard-won wisdom for the next generation. Or maybe not. So that's the idea. It's the whole first half of the album that made me think, like, this guy sold out, which he didn't. I'm just a silly person. He didn't. It is a compassionate take on a successful rapper who raps about bags and money and drugs and stuff. It's not pointing down. It's not doing the thing that sometimes rap music does, sometimes sort of intellectually stimulating rap music does, of looking down at what those people rap about. It's not that. It's sort of taking the position of compassion and saying, what does it mean? You know, what does it mean? He's very conscious of, obviously, of class and race all the way throughout the entire album. What does it mean to be making that kind of music for, sorry, that was Bo, a largely white populace? What does it mean? What do you experience? What do you go through? Now, of course, I can't go on without talking a little bit about the album cover. So let's look at the album cover here. Oh, there's my thumbnail. Let's look at this album cover. So if you haven't seen it, okay, this is Winslow Homer's After the Hurricane. And it's the cover of the album, just this. And maybe you don't know this painting either. That's okay. That just means you haven't been to the Art Institute of Chicago in a while. I haven't been there since like 95, since like before this dude was born. So that's okay. So there's a lot of things to see in this painting. First of all, it's a watercolor. That's a very amazing, solid work of watercolor. It's made by Winslow Homer, who's a artist from Boston, one of the great American artists of the 19th century. Again, I'm telling you, this dude is a history professor specializing in 19th century America. And there's a lot of things to note here. You know, it's called After the Hurricane, and the way that he depicts the scene here is very intentional. So artists will often indicate stability with horizontal lines, they will indicate power with vertical lines, and they indicate chaos and uncertainty with diagonal lines. This is all diagonal lines, from the wave to this boat to the rudder on the boat to the shoreline. With the exception of the horizon, it's basically all diagonal, and it creates that sense of unsettling. It's weird how unbelievably central this boat is, and how you can't even really read what it is. It's almost abstract. It's so weird, the angle that he chose to use it. And then, of course, there's the fact that it was painted in the Bahamas when Winslow Homer's in the Bahamas, and features, yes, a non-white character, a protagonist of African descent. And this guy is very clearly here after a hurricane. So in the context that I just read to you what the album is about, the hurricane was fame, was growing up in North Philadelphia, was living this life of precarity, was becoming famous for describing the life of precarity and violence and drugs and sex and all that, and then getting popularity. This is the state that he is starting this album in. This is where he is. And that is Goyard Ibn Said. And that's the kind of level that he's working on, where he's working as sort of he's able to draw these connections between historical events and current events. That is what really great artists can do. And you may also notice that this is like another artist. And if you don't know, I'm a big fan of Billy Woods' art. I think this is a very woodsy album and a very woodsy cover. Give a hoot, don't pollute. That's what Woodsy the Owl said. And this, sorry, I have to say it. If I call something woodsy, I have to say that. Woodsy Allen. So like depicted, like there's not many images of people of African descent in the art canon of pre-20th century art. So the cover of Ethiops by Billy Woods obviously was by Rembrandt, and then here we have Homer. There is kind of a connection, but the real connection, I think, is this stylistic ability to be rapping with the knowledge and the perspective of a scholar, while also having the sort of compassion and vision of somebody who came from the streets. Does that make sense? So if you like Woods, you should like this. And also, like, I love Woods, but like, if you start a revolution and nobody follows you, then you're just kind of just sort of a person. Like, you didn't really succeed anything. And I really feel that this is a great sign that that kind of rap has a future. Two more very quick thoughts on pop culture ideas. I am watching Severance right now, the Apple show. If you haven't seen it, it's very good. It's all about people who go to work, and when they go to work, their entire memory is wiped, and they have two different personalities, one that's in work and one that's out of work. I think you could make an argument that this album is in a way like Severance, and in the way that it shows like the labor of being a rapper, the labor of, like the labor of being a crime rapper is you have to put on this persona, you have to be this person, you have to perform this particular vision of blackness that is accepted and largely monetized. And then, like, where is the real you and the not real you, right? Like, there's an interesting thing there. I could imagine a very interesting concept album about rappers that use the Severance model. And also just, watch the party die. If we're watching the party die, if we're watching rap evolve kind of past its sort of party and bullshit mode that it's been in for the last long time, this album, I think, would be an essential part of that because it is so compassionate towards the party while also being against it. So let's get to the first act, okay? The first act, the Goyard act, starts off with a white guy explaining the whole story, makes fun of the record label. Many great minds made possible by Fat Possum's lack of forethought in giving Gais money. And that's a funny way to start it and a very self-aware way of starting it until finally we get to the first track. And just before you listen to this album, you need to know he's really committed to this bit. This whole first album, there's a little bit there where there's interstitial moments that make it clear that this is an act. But the actual music and the actual raps very rarely take the mask off. So you're just basically getting modern crime, money cash hoe style rap music without much winking. So you just have to understand that it's a bit. All the world is a stage. The line from Shakespeare is actually quoted in one of the interstitial bits, and everybody plays different roles. The old guard is dead. So, like I said, they sent me all of his notes for each song. This is interesting because he is working a lot less with samples on this album, I think because, Fat Possum is a label. He's not releasing individually. So he's talked about restriction, breeding innovation. And I think we find that on the production. Whatever it was that he found here is just super epic. It has, Diddy is an important figure. Puff Daddy is an important figure in this album in a lot of ways. A lot of negative ways. A positive way is a lot of his projects started with really epic songs, and I love it when a rap album starts with a song that makes you want to enter the ring. Makes you want to just. And this does that. The way it also these trap drums and this high singing reminds me a lot of the London on the Track song for 21 Savage, Red Rum, which I think when we look back at this period of hip hop, we're going to say that Red Rum is one of the most influential songs of the mid 20s. And a lot of these lyrics are just, very materialist, talking about Dior, and there's a whole part where he just gives up on rapping. I need a she need a we need a but he does mix up the flow. Much like with Woods, it's hard for me to determine how good of a rapper he is because, some rappers, it's how they say it, and other rappers, it's what they say, and sometimes it's both. Right? So I would say that what makes Kendrick Lamar so great is what he's saying and how he says it. And I would say that, Pusha T, it's how he says it, not what he says. And with rappers where what they're saying is so important, it can be hard to determine their actual, qualities as a rapper in terms of flow and rhyme choice. So I actually don't know. I'm confident in calling this album a masterpiece of a concept album. I'll put it up there with The Wall by Pink Floyd, sure. I'm not positive as a rap album in terms of production and rapping because I just haven't spent enough time with it. And I feel like I need to spend more time with it to really make that determination because it hits you with ideas so hard that you end up getting kind of stuck on the ideas, which is what happens to me with Woods albums as well. Cool kind of rat-a-tat-ta style third verse. He does do a lot of different flow changes, and he... I brought him to water, they just couldn't get it. I done became everything that you didn't. Interstitial bit here talking about being in costume. There's a song called Leprosy. And at some point he says, I'm on your nerves like leprosy. That's why, like this dude, I think might also be a science professor. I don't know, because I knew the leprosy meant that like your fingers fell off, but I didn't realize it was a neurological disease that had to do with your nerves. I'm not even going to look that up. I'm just going to assume that Gais knew that, and I don't. And now I'm going to say that. This song is this great kind of shuffling beat. Kind of reminds me of Everybody on the Line Outside by the Flip Mode Squad, the Busta Rhymes thing. It's a great, not a lot of rap songs with that particular beat. It's lilting and sweet. Makes reference to Craven the Hunter. Ladies and gentlemen, the Craven the Hunter rap reference era has begun. There's a whole line trying to piece them back together. Jackie Kennedy. That's just rough. God damn. Because, you know, everyone's seen the JFK footage, but he's talking about the part where Jackie Kennedy, his wife, sees her husband has a bullet through his brain, and so she sees the brain on the back hood of the car, and so she goes back there to try to scoop up the brains to put them in the back of his head so he can be alive again, because she's in shock. And that's the point that he's bringing out here. You can smell hate, the function, the stench of enmity. Is it enmity or enmity? Is it EMNITY or is it ENMITY? Anyways, even though he's playing this character of Goyard, he's also still using words like enmity. It's got this. The second half of the chorus is just the super misogynist. This is what turned me off to the album, by the way. It all depends. Do you F on the first night, kick her ass out if she's not that type? I'm like, oh, I see. So you're a radical communist, except when it comes to treating women like garbage, in which case you're totally fine with the capitalistic system of exchange. So that's fine. And then, which obviously he's playing this character. I now understand, because I'm not a silly person. It really bothers my wife when I use the term idiot because it's an ableist term. So just sit with that for a while. Try not to use that word. So says the doctor and Mrs., and she's usually right about these things, / always right. I have to look at my baby monitor to make sure my 2-year-old's not awake. Okay, she's stirring but not standing. That means I can keep going. So there's a quote from Diddy here, referring to someone that's a baller, shot caller. Hey, this is like all about the Benjamins, you know. Now, what you want to be? Want to be a baller, shot caller, brawler, who be dipping in the Benz with a spaller. I've listened to that song for so many years. I don't know all the lyrics, but I think that's on purpose because I think Diddy is a good example of this mentality of rap going too far. And then my favorite interstitial bit, small golf clap for Gais Guevara. You will know the movie CB4. CB4 is a crucial piece of hip-hop history that has been largely forgotten for reasons I do not understand. You might say, oh, that's that Chris Rock movie. Yeah, Chris Rock co-wrote it, and he stars in it, but it's actually a Nelson George movie. Nelson George, who is, in my opinion, you know, one of the most important scholars in hip-hop history. He was there with Run DMC. He was there. He wrote the book Hip Hop America, which was literally my introduction to the concept of being able to think about hip-hop as a scholarly pursuit. He was there writing articles in the 70s about what was going on in the Bronx. He really is that guy. Sorry, you're going to hear my dog Bo slowly walking around, scratching himself and getting some water. That's the click-clack you hear in the back. So Nelson George wrote the movie. And it's an amazing piece of satire all about rap music, about the late 80s, about the early 90s, about gangster rap, and about its falseness. And so this is the scene in Trust Us Records. If you can't trust me, you can't trust us, and you can't trust him. And he's asking, you know, do you swear in your songs? Do you defile women? Do you have respect for anything at all? And they say, not a goddamn thing. And he says, well, great, then welcome to the family. And I think this is a very great movie and a very great quotation because it talks about the way in which this kind of nihilistic behavior is supported by the larger structures in a capitalist society. So, during the first culture, First or Second Culture United, I mentioned CB4, and FD Signifier said, oh, I need to do a video about that. So when he does a video about it, you're going to watch it and you're going to say, oh, how come no one told me about this before? I'm telling you, go watch CB4. And when you do, when you see the Bagheads, know that Professor Sky and his two friends went dressed up as the Bagheads for Halloween my senior year of high school. That's the kind of cool guy I was. Next song is called 3400. That's the compassion of this album that I love so much, because this is a song that's not about Goyard. It's about Gais. It's about him. It's about who he is, because he's talking about touring. You know, before he started rapping, he'd never been anywhere, and then now he's traveling internationally, and how far away he is, and a great trap beat underneath these whiny sounds. The production here is so good. He's a very, very good producer. It's awesome. Just a crazy opening lyric. Leave it and bleeding, breathless in the snow like Jeremy Renner. Jeremy Renner almost died in a plow accident. But this really catchy chorus, 3,400 miles from the hood, can't get it out of me. This whole idea of being sort of stuck in that mentality even when you're traveling around. And it's just really nicely made. And I think he's really talking about himself, and he's talking about the character of Goyard, and about the fact there are a lot of rappers who literally are stuck, right? They are stuck in a cycle of poverty. They are stuck in a particular place in a particular city, and then they get out, and all of a sudden they're in like Amsterdam or China or United Arab Emirates, and all of a sudden they're having all these experiences, but they don't have like the scaffolding to understand, like they haven't had the experience of traveling beforehand, so it must all be insanely overwhelming. You know, it's just crazy. It's crazy that we just keep doing this. Just send people to like, oh, here you go. You mostly lived within a six block radius. Why don't you go to Bologna? Next song, I Gazed Upon the Trap with Ambition. He says it's his favorite song title ever. Had a lot of fun recording. This is what he says. This is what Kid Me imagined rapping to be like. A good time. Let's hope it continues to be. This has kind of... So I think this album will have a lot of popularity with the internet folks. The internet folks who love that Swedish rap, the kind of gauzy, dreamy stuff that Swedish rappers are able to come up to. But then there's also a Avatar reference, not the bad Avatar, the good one, the dude with the arrow on his head, the cartoon, to Ba Sing Se, which is nice because I do like Avatar. Very simple but advanced, kind of like an advanced style of rapping, but still very trap lyrics. Puerto Rican plug, called him Rico since a young thug, bugging on the streets, caught a Rico like he's young thug. You know, very simple, the style of raps you'd get out of Atlanta, but he's just having fun with it, being creative, really playing this Goyard figure. Continuing on to the next song, Monta Ellis featuring Yoko McThuggin. Big shout out to Yoko McThuggin, who turns out is from Baltimore. My son now works in Baltimore, so that's exciting. And just a rapper who takes Yoko's first name and McThuggin, that's just very, very funny. A very glitchy beat, very bass heavy. This is a headphones album. It's not really, I mean, it does okay in the car, but like it doesn't do well on a computer. Like you need to, because the bass really goes hard on this album. And then a whole verse about my Colombian shawty trying to go to D.C. She thinks District of Columbia is where her people be. A funny kind of joke, but then he goes deeper. If you think about it, ain't far-fetched. Alpo maneuvered through Appalachians to move the Escobars that gave rap hydration. So it goes this whole thing like, isn't she silly for thinking that D.C. is District of Columbia? But then he goes on to talk about the way in which heroin, Alpo, dog food, was moved through the Appalachians. So like, then the fact that the American government was complicit in the drug trade, and then the fact that Pablo Escobar was from Colombia, and the fact that the District of Columbia, the Washington D.C., was ravaged by the rap, by the crack epidemic, but then that the crack epidemic itself helped to create so much rap, which is what he says in the next line. To move the Escobar that gave rap hydration, everything is intertwined and connected. I ain't never touched the rock, but without its consequences, I wouldn't have defected to this lifestyle of lyricism. So like without the consequences of the crack epidemic, there'd never be gangster rap, which means that Goyard would never exist. So actually, thinking of Washington, D.C. as the District of Columbia is not entirely wrong. This dude's 24. Damn it. That's young. That's young. That's too young. Not fair. And I really like Yoko McThuggin on here. And then some more. There's a lot of like internet. There's some like soccer references on here, which I like. 100 every time I hit a club. Bitch, I'm Neymar. That's cool. You know, Neymar's famous for spending too much time and money in clubs. So I have to check my baby monitor again. I just heard a big old thump upstairs. 22 with at least 2 projects of the year. Muslim with the French B word, Battle of Algiers. I was referencing the movie Battle of Algiers. His references are just out of control on this album. They just really are. Next song is called Iman, featuring Pharoah. A great feature here. Just starts off, it's Goyard. He's really trying to do this whole persona, this like booming bass, just these ethereal sounds. Brody, Gotta Chill, Let It Rock. Pew, 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 pew. Jared Leto, Off This Liquor. Bay, IDK, How to Act. Got a Material Girl on Hold. Look Like I'm Cation Jack. Almost kind of Playboy Cardi style beat in the back. And then Pharoah just has this crazy fast flow. Just really, I'm not hip to Pharoah, and this is just a really great verse. And then there's a reference to Jonathan David. Kick It in Canada, Jonathan David. Jonathan David, who plays for Lille and Ligue 1. One of my favorite soccer players. I love the Canadian team. Lots of great players up there. World Cup's coming 2026. Okay. And they're all going to be taking pictures with Drake, so what are you going to do? Then the final track of Act 1 is Camera Shy. I remember the day I figured out the hook. I said, yo, we got one. That's what he says. This crazy soul loop pitched up and a rumbling bass. We hit the function in fashion and can't conceal the high. Our red eyes like the crimson shade of sunrise. And then the whole thing has this whole chorus has a theme about these bags. You want Vivienne, you got it. Make sure they know I bought it. I've been fascinated by the fact that rappers moved on from like, rapping about having Gucci's, looking at my Gucci, it's about that time, to like bragging about buying Gucci bags for women who they have sex with. Like, there's so much money and there's such a need to display wealth at all times that now rappers rap more about women's fashion than about men's fashion. It's a weird thing. And then he refers to alcohol as liver poison. He's never fully in character, I guess. Ends with this polite clapping, and then we have this white voice coming back again, saying terrified of what he's become, and then this whole line. Then Act 2 starts. And this is quoting here, okay? When a slave was drunk, the slaveholder had no fear that he would plan an insurrection, no fear that he would escape to the north. The drink of choice, however, is no ordinary spirit. It's an ambition, thrusted upon us through aesthetics tailored for you by those who toil with ideas that make men feel like gods. And our protagonist is one who has fallen victim to the addictive properties of this concoction. So the idea is that the ambition to be a successful entertainer, a successful rapper, is a kind of drunkenness that pacifies black people. That's the theory here, that drunk slaves are not dangerous, and as it says here, every triumph is a tragedy in sheep's clothing, that every triumph is actually a tragedy because it's going after this form of drunkenness, of fame, as opposed to, trying to fight the power, to quote. It's interesting because when I reviewed this album, when I was going to do this album, I'm like, awesome, because I got a lot of political rage. I'm very unhappy right now. Things are very bad. The Civil Rights Act was a small step in the right direction, but undoing it is a huge step in the wrong direction. You know what I'm saying? So I thought this album was going to help me get all that anger out. It's not. It's a much more contemplative album. Bystander Effect is the next track. This is the only track not produced by him. DJ Haram is on here, and Elucid's on here, also on Fat Possum Records. Just this ghostly beat with these bongo sounds. Lots of kind of African percussion on here. His voice is kind of small. From where the heart severs, all roll dice with the cyclical serfdom, and I owe you nothing. We're all going through something. I'm a play my role. Like these little African drums at the end here, and Elucid comes out, and he's just fine. White man walked through industrial blocks wearing keffiyeh around his neck like metal strangers on the internet being parasocial. I still say, don't get familiar. We can agree it's all falling, but where you feel tears, my mouth smirked in satisfaction, anticipation, black existential adaptation. So much on this album. There's so much going on in this album. It's beautiful. It's his energy matches this energy perfectly. 4L is more kind of like swirling sounds, kind of a nice stutter step. I love the bass here. It's kind of maybe even Lupe-ish at times. Ruthless, Marcus Rufus, I just need a glimpse. I went down this rabbit hole trying to figure out which Marcus Rufus he's talking about, because there was Marcus Caius Rufus and Marcus Manicius Rufus from ancient Rome, and I don't know the answer. I don't spend that much time thinking about Rome or fighting bears, so I don't quite get it. All I can say is you have to be a history professor to fully get all this album, and also you have to be a rap fan, because there's some Kid Cudi style oohs, which I really like here. A nice kind of synth solo, someone saying that you need to hear this in the club. Like, this has kind of an EDM style, faster flow at the end, and a little guitar solo. It's really awesome. And then we get to my favorite track on the album, The Apple That Scarcely Fell. It's just this loop that he found, I guess, that's this harpsichord, and starts off with SpongeBob Squidward saying, "Everybody get ready." And this harpsichord beat is so nice, and there's no drums. And there's no drums because the drums are just his voice. And just how strong. Never redressed the balance. John White, when presented with a challenge. John White was a colonial governor of Roanoke. A colonial governor of Roanoke? Why is a 24-year-old rap artist making reference to a colonial governor of Roanoke from the 18th century? I don't know the answer to that question. All I could do is say, okay, you got me on Wikipedia. I am sure there's something there. Seriously. Am I that far off? And then at the end he says, "No savely geekin'. She think her partner's got strength of witches." Savali Geikin or Geekin or Gukin is a character from a Chekhov play who thought that his wife was a witch, and there was like a storm, and I had to look it up because I didn't know it. He's making reference to colonial governors and Chekhov while at the same time making a very awesome rap song. You just sort of have to do two things. You have to get really deep into it and study it and understand it and love it. And also, you just have to shut up and enjoy this great music. You really have to do both of those things. Uh-oh, my 2-year-old is now sitting up and moving around. Okay, as long as she's on the bed and not on the ground, I should be fine. Some tension here. And then some strings come in. And it's just amazing these strings come in. The way these strings come in, the way it's produced. Again, this dude's only 24, which is annoying as hell because he's too good of a producer to be that young. Oh, by the way, I watch movies while I listen to music when I go to the gym. The movie When We Were Kings is now out on Pluto, which means it's free. You have to watch some ads, but if you've not seen When We Were Kings, it is the best sports documentary. It is one of the best documentaries of all time. It is about Ali Foreman fight in what was then called Zaire. A lot of the themes of this album, I think, are found there. If you consider yourself to be somebody who's interested in Black American history, international Black history, world history, sports history, go watch When We Were Kings. I was so psyched when I saw that because that movie's not been on streaming. It has not been on streaming for like 10 years. Next song is called Branded. And then here we have more like mournful string quartets. It's more kind of classical sounding, but over trap beats. And how much of a second chance. And this whole like chorus in the background is this, drop every Zan and Perky, help me see my demons lurk. And a lot of the themes of self-destruction that are present in modern crime rap are right here. And he says, now I'm strange fruit. The concept that like modern rappers are in some extent lynched by their profession, or maybe that they are essentially human sacrifices for the dominant power. Human sacrifices for white enjoyment, for entertainment? I don't know. But he describes, no, I do know. I think that's what he's saying. I don't know. I think that's what he's saying. What do I know? And then he describes the trauma that he grew up with. 30,000 feet up, face melting from congestion. And as I wondered if agony was part of bigger lessons, I remember helicopters spun the block, yellow tape, abundant cops running, trying to save the hostages from the cunning. Okay, I have to go get her. I'll be back on this video. Okay, so I now have a baby on my lap. So if you hear some noises, that might be that. And if I'm shaking around a lot, it's because I'm trying to keep her rocking here. Okay. So, this whole description, and the school locks down for the umpteenth time because they was selling at the Poppy store and suddenly was gunning. You'd think we came from ashes anew, joining the crew. Oh, he and Alpha bet A, B, C what these do, shells to the chest or to his head. He's describing the trauma that's described in the music, but here he's sort of describing it from a more political standpoint. And there's just strings and rapping, and it's just so, so good. The next track is called Critical Acclaim, which he says is reworked from... Bo, don't you dare go... No, Bo, don't go in the kitchen. I'm sorry. I've got some kind of day going here. All right. All right. So, son of a... I leave the door open for like 1 second, and that dog goes in the kitchen. It's okay. That's my fault. So Critical Acclaim is... Here, don't turn towards the camera. I've got to keep you off the camera. All right, fine. Put you back down here. Okay. So this is an interesting song because it references like Diddy. It references all of the stuff that's happening in the hallway, that, someone describing what it was like being around Diddy, and then this like crashing piano, this resetting beat with the tambourine in the back, and it's just these junky drums. This great it's maybe my favorite production of his on the album, maybe because it's from his it's an old... Sorry, she's smiling. It's an old song, and now Bo's drinking water. Have you ever heard a dog drink water louder? Did you see what I have? Did you see what I do for y'all? I've been up for hours doing this video. It's okay. Seriously, he's never going to stop. He makes reference to enkephalin, which is some kind of pain receptor in the brain. I'm telling you, this guy is a scientist. This whole idea, catching bodies for the critical acclaim. You just caught a body, but you feel no shame. More stuff, and then the second half here feels like it's about actual assault, and this seems to be talking about complicity in having a mentor who is complicit in actual assault. The second to last song is called Shaitan Spiderweb. Shaitan is the Arabic way of saying Satan. And just cool synths over more booming bass. Too many hoes on my phone. This feels almost like it should be from part one. But it's got this awesome ending production here. These Afrobeat sounds, super chaotic. Some saxophone in there. And then the white guy comes back to close the album. He lied there, terrified of what he was, is, and is becoming. I'm going to read this again, but I'm going to read this with the proper image. He lied there, terrified of what he was, is, and is becoming, only to be awakened but to rapturous applause. So I want you to imagine right here that he just got off this hurricane, what he became, most decorated pedestal. It's enough to distract him from this plague once more. Then the final track is called You Can Skip This Part. So You Can Skip This Part is pretty interesting because this is maybe the most similar to his last album. It's his most directly political song, and it shows a lot of anger, a lot of understandable anger just at people like myself who can get sunburned in a snowstorm. Okay, super ratty drum machine, pitched up sample, just really militant. I'm dancing for these crackers while I call these N-words crackers, and I'm dapping up the rappers that's subservient to crackers. So what happened to the fact that we'd be stuck in a contraption that's created by these crackers, swear this music-ish be backwards? And he even goes after liberal rap fans. Okay, so he's not making you comfortable. If you like his music, if you have been spending, I don't know, however long I've been spending running around my house like a well, not I'm not gonna say lunatic, like a silly person trying to get this video out, that you're not safe either. Liberal rap fan, kumbaya, holding hands, group singing songs. What's it good for? Why can't we be friends? My patience wearing as thin as my capacity to constantly be saying rest in peace to black women and men. And I'm yearning for. Oh my God, that's a lot of spit up. Do I have a bib? 1 second. That's not a bib. Wait, do I have a burp cloth? No, this is just, you are making me suffer for my art. I'm just kidding. So just really going after my legacy determined by white hands, right? And that's the trick. Again, please don't get confused. It is not that white people like rap more than black people like rap. It is that statistically, white people in America are a majority, therefore they have more buying power, therefore there are more white fans of rap. People get it too confused, acting like it's that white people just like rap more. That's not it. But it is true that in order to be a financially solvent rapper, you probably have to please white fans. And that must be a complicated relationship to have when you feel reasonably that a lot of your trouble comes from being in a white supremacist society. It's cool when I say it in my apps. When I hop up on that app, then it's a method of attack. So he's really just saying that, like, he can't say how he feels on Twitter, because if he does, then he might be canceled and lose all this access to power, because it just takes... I know, dear. I know. I'm almost done. So a fascinating line here just keeps on going. I could never be Hollywood because every dollar I earn is through the image of a hood. Be a effing prize where identity crisis caused because every day is a disguise. And then most importantly, he ends the whole thing with Dave Chappelle talking about why he stopped the Chappelle Show. It was where he did a sketch and he made a racist joke, and just one of the people who works on the show, one white guy, just laughed too much. And he couldn't figure out if people were laughing with him or at him. I'm going to go to my slideshow now because I have to like take care of this baby right here. So this is nice. So I can kind of hide behind this. And I think this is an interesting question of, as a white consumer and supporter of hip hop, you know, because like obviously me talking about this is good for the album, because at least 1,000 people will think about it who weren't thinking about it before, if not more than that, you know? But you know, like, as a white fan, you just have to accept that you have earned this contempt, even if you have not earned it. Even if you have not individually did it, you have benefited from the structures that are being described here. So just don't take it personally. You know, like, understand that you have simultaneously earned and not earned that contempt. So I said that I would be showing you a funny slideshow. So this is just a weird thing right here. That's Batman. That's that weird light thing. Hey, what's up with that weird light thing being so popular? You know, at the 2021 Louis Vuitton show, speaking of French high fashion, curated by Virgil Abloh, starring Mos Def, or I think he was still Mos Def when this was done. Maybe he changed his name to Yassine Bey. Point is, they used that same aesthetic, and then those pig fuckers, when they made that pro-racist blackface video, decided to use that same fashion and style with the lights above in a grid. And then these are the publicity photos for Gaius Guevara for this album. So, I don't know. I thought that was funny. I thought that was interesting. Just how much... the fact that within a week I saw this image and thought, oh wow, look at these corrupt racists doing this stuff, and I'm like, oh, look at one of the most interesting upcoming political rappers using the same aesthetic. So anyways, that's actually kind of a dumb point. This is the mood board that he shared for the first act, which I think is pretty fun and interesting. I mean, you want to talk about a Gen Z album? So first of all, the album ends with complaining about basically getting canceled for what you say on Twitter, which I'm not making fun of, because the stakes are very high. When you make your living off of white acceptance, it must be very stressful, not knowing when and where you can say what you actually think. But anyways, so this is his mood board for Act 1. My particular favorite bit there is saying that the Goyard mimics the swagger and simplicity of the Diet Coke video. So that Diet Coke video with Pusha T and Ye, I think is pretty good. And so you can pause that if you want to look at that. It's pretty interesting. And then there's the Act 2 board. You know, you got Malcolm X and Tupac and a bunch of anime stuff. You know, a bunch of anime stuff and like manga and all that. Because, you know, okay, great. Now Toby's getting into the act. Look at this. Look at this life that I got going on here. These are my Patreons. They give me money so I can buy music. Yeah, I like this album. I think I'm going to buy it. I think you should too. Unless, I don't know, maybe Fat Possum will send it to me. That'd be cool. But that's not why I'm doing this video. But I have to let you know that is a possibility. am not a journalist, but I try to have journalistic integrity anyways. Where's the rest of my Patreons? All right, well, I might have missed you. I apologize if I missed you. I got too much going on here. I got 2 dogs drinking water. I don't even know where my baby monitor is anymore. Let's see. She's doing jumping jacks. She's doing somersaults. I got the newborn on my lap. She's spitting up. Also, I asked my Patreons if they want a shout out. Some of them did. Jack Dyson, Cinny, Super Cami, Toby Repellent, No Way, and Fadlan Chic. All right. Whew. Video's done. Hope you enjoyed it. Please tell me you listened to this album. It's an amazing piece of art. It really is. It might end up being one of the albums of the year. It's just a spectacular piece of art, a spectacular concept album. All right. Until next time, there's the camera.